Mama bear does this after man saves cubs. He watched in horror as the bear cubs tried desperately to stay above the water. Their mother was nowhere in sight. Where was she? He was just a fisherman. But what he saw before him felt fated. He knew he had to help despite nature wanting to take the cubs. The cries of the younglings were too much. He made a plan. Ruslan Lukanen was born and raised in Moscow. He decided to spend a day relaxing on the water with his friend. He thought they could see what was biting and knock back a cold one. Ruslan and his friend went onto the calm waters of Lake Vigazero, which is 1,250 kilometers squared. But with the 500 kilometers squared of woods around the lake, there are many things that can happen. The two men fished and weren't there for very long before seeing three animals in the water. It was a bear with her cubs trying to find a path to the other side of the lake. He didn't bat an eye since bears are quite common in the wilderness of Russia. But as the men watched the spectacle, they realized something was wrong. The mother swam to land with her strong legs, but her cubs were struggling. It was an awful sight to witness. The current in the lake was strong that day. Soon the mother bear moved further and further from her cubs as they struggled to keep up. The mother bear must have been thinking of her own survival. She managed to get to the island while her children could barely stay above the water. The men were faced with a dilemma. Ruslan couldn't watch them in peril and knew something had to happen. Ruslan knew that he couldn't act until the mother bear was far away from her cubs. He was worried she could turn around and defend them. As time passed, the cubs would struggle more and more. But once the mother was far enough away, they drove their boat close to the cubs, doing so slowly as not to startle them. Once the boat was close, the young bears scrambled to get on board. Ruslan could then see that they were severely fatigued from swimming in the water. Any longer and they wouldn't be able to last. He had no idea how to even get him to safety. He wanted to make sure he was safe too. One of the young bears made it to the edge of the boat and hooked his paws onto the lip of the boat. He wasn't strong enough to get himself on board as much as he tried. Ruslan watched as the cub in desperation bit the side of the boat to stay afloat. They just needed a way to haul him into the boat. The men decided to use their fishing net to help push the cub onto the boat. But it would be no easy feat. A soaking wet bear cub was infinitely heavier than the fish the net was designed to hold. But this was their best chance, so they had to try. Ruslan jumped into the water while his friend took the net and slowly slid it under the cub's bottom, hoping to scoop him up and propel him over the side. Then, an incredible thing happened. The cub turned toward the men and looked straight at them, seemingly acknowledging their efforts to help. He struggled and grunted as the net slowly raised him higher, all the while Ruslan spoke to him in a calm, hushed voice. "We'll rescue you, don't be afraid," he said to the bear. He wondered aloud whether the cub would bite them, to which his friend replied, "He won't, he's just clinging on for his life." Then, finally, the miracle occurred. With the help of the fishing net, the cub made it onto the boat at last. Though the men had worried he'd attack them in fear, it was clear this young bear was too tired to do anything except lie where he had landed. But the fishermen knew their work was not done, yet the other bear cub was still in the water. Luckily, they knew what to do. Armed with the knowledge that their fishing net was strong enough to support the weight of a young bear, the men confidently scooped up the other cub as it continued to struggle to stay afloat. They deposited him next to his brother, then stood there for a minute, letting what they had just accomplished sink in. Then, it was time to decide what to do with the young critters. Ruslan and his friend knew that the best chance the cubs would have to survive was to be reunited with their mother. Even though she'd left them to fend for themselves in the lake, she'd probably be happy to have them back. So the fishermen headed toward the island that she had swum to. But it remained to be seen whether they'd actually find her. The men dragged their boat ashore and cautiously looked around, hoping to catch a glimpse of the female bear. However, she was nowhere in sight. Meanwhile, the cubs themselves didn't seem to be in a rush to find her. They stayed inside the boat, too weak to get up and walk away. Ruslan and his friend knew there was only one thing they could do. Though they had been reluctant this whole time to get too close to the cubs, the fishermen knew they would need help getting out of the boat and into the forest. So, with the utmost care, they picked them up once more and transported them to the edge of the trees. They left them there and sailed away, hoping their mother would find them. As they watched from the boat, a hulking figure emerged from the tree line. It was the cub's mother. She looked at the men as if to thank them, then they all trotted back into the bushes. Footage of the cub's rescue was shared on YouTube by Russian media outlet RT. The video quickly went viral, amassing almost 200,000 views in a few months. When interviewed, Ruslan was asked why he and his friends took such a risk. "It was dangerous. Of course," he said. "But they are living creatures. We couldn't just look the other way. Would you do the same thing?"